webinar, but all ready to begin. So let me start by saying hello and thanks for joining me for today's webinar covering what's new, why you should upgrade, and how to start using the new features in Sitecore 9.3. Before we crack on with the rest of the presentation, a few bits of housekeeping. Yes, before you ask, this session will be recorded and I will share a link to this in a few days. The session will last only 30 minutes, so hopefully not too much time out of your day. And you can drop any questions that you may have into the toolbar on the right-hand side of your screen. And if we have time at the end of today's webinar, I will do my best to try and answer these. But as usual, if I don't have time today, I will get back to you within a day or so with an answer. Before we begin, a totally shameless plug for Ratio, but I promise I'll be really short and sweet. First, I forgot to introduce myself before. My name is Mario Kiriakou. I'm the co-founder here at Ratio. We've been a Sitecore partner for 5 years now, and in that time we've worked with over 25 Sitecore clients with a focus on building solutions which adhere to Sitecore best practice, supporting in-house teams, and helping you start using more of the marketing features of the platform. And obviously we're going to be covering some of that off today as well. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of what's in the latest release, let's just have a quick overview of what Sitecore contains within the platform. It's good to know, especially if you think of Sitecore as a pure CMS or development framework. So in essence, what is Sitecore? Well, it has quite a lot, which is probably why whenever I meet clients, they're always surprised by what's in the platform. So at a very high level, and this isn't completely comprehensive. There's lots more things which are included, but for brevity's sake, these are some of the main things. The ability to manage multilingual sites and locations, deliver personalized experiences, collect lots and lots and lots of customer data and customer interactions, an analytics, A/B testing platform, a machine learning module, its own email and automation platform, and they've introduced new features and platforms such as their own e-commerce engine and a new campaign content management platform as well. Before we go into 9.3, and I know that's the purpose of today's webinar, I just wanted to recap on 9 because if you're still on version 8 or lower, or maybe you've upgraded to 9, in either case, you may not be aware of some of the major releases that have come from before 9.3, so that's 9, 9.1 and 9.2. Sitecore 9 in itself didn't feel like much of a big release, but, and it's a big but, from 9 till the current release with 9.3, the total number of new additions and improvements to the back end and also new features have resulted in this being a pretty major step forward as a release for Sitecore. So what was new in Sitecore 9? So a couple of the major things. Sitecore Headless was fully introduced. This meant you can build upon your favorite JavaScript framework to build fully JavaScript-enabled Sitecore solutions, but still using the full editing experience and still giving you access to all of the marketing features. So a big change from building, I suppose, in the traditional sense of back-end .NET and front-end development. Introduced something new around the universal tracker. So this was a new REST API with base tracking capabilities to track behavior beyond browsers. So the tracker will collect interactions beyond what is currently possible with, I suppose, traditional cookie-based browser tracking. The Sitecore Cortex machine learning engine, I'm going to talk about that a little bit in a second, but basically this is a flexible machine learning engine built upon Microsoft's Azure Machine Learning Studio, and the idea being it's built natively into Sitecore. It has it's integrated into XDB, so it's collecting all the data that's being used, but it's analyzing that to come up with proactive recommendations on what different personalization experiences could look like for your customers, and then delivering on it. A bit like, bring your own wine to a restaurant, bring your own machine learning. So one of the cool features around Sitecore Cortex was the ability to connect with other different machine learning platforms such as IBM Watson. We've been trialing here at Ratio Microsoft's Azure machine learning platform integrated fully into Sitecore to power a lot of the machine learning algorithms and experiences. But basically, if you have a preferred machine learning tool, you have the ability to connect and integrate with Sitecore. The Experience Accelerator, so this was a new wireframing module for rapid page design and prototyping. Salesforce Marketing Cloud integration, so this is basically the ability to connect the two systems using Sitecore's out-of-the-box connector and provide like bi-directional exchange of data between Sitecore and Salesforce Marketing Cloud. There's quite a lot more to it. It's probably a whole session around just talking about what you could do with Sitecore and Salesforce Marketing Cloud, but perhaps for another day. And another thing was integration with their Content Hub platform. And this is super useful if you're doing lots and lots of content-led type campaigns. And last but not least, the Forms module was built from the ground up. So it's very much an unloved feature within Sitecore's development platform, but it's something which was, when we speak to clients, everyone uses Forms day in, day out. And the new Forms module is far more flexible and gives you far more control over how you can use your forms. As I mentioned earlier, Cortex. So Cortex and XConnect. We always think of these as the forgotten product. There was a lot of noise about this when released, but I rarely heard it brought up as something clients are thinking or even working with. In a nutshell, XConnect, so separate from Cortex, which is the fancy name for their machine learning tool, but XConnect allows you to leverage Sitecore as your sort of data middle layer and to suck in all other types of marketing/customer data that you have in other systems. But the idea being, once connected, as the old story goes, you can leverage that rich data in one system to then deliver something super relevant for your customers. So quick recap on 9 to 9.2 done. So for what everyone's here for today, what's in 9.3? Probably a good idea to just provide some context around how Sitecore positions its vision, as this influences very much the rationale behind any new feature which comes out in new iterations and major releases. So Sitecore's vision has for a very long time been about more than just giving you a CMS. To be honest, it's far too expensive to be treated as just a CMS. There are lots of simpler, cheaper options out there if that's all you're looking for. It's fundamentally about having a platform which collects enormous amounts of customer data, and then the idea being that you can then leverage it to really change up the experience that your customers are experiencing based on what you know about them. Obviously, it's the traditional spiel that comes out with vendors, but it's important to understand their overarching vision, because when you're looking at the new features coming out, it's much easier to think about it within the context of that vision and how it enables you to turn what is a complex vision into the hard graph to turn into day-to-day reality of actually delivering on this. So what we're going to cover off today, we're going to go through 6 main features. We're going to look at Sitecore Horizon, which is an updated editing experience, experience optimization dashboard, so having all your data in one view, form improvements, email experience manager, marketing automation, and search. So let's crack on. So within Sitecore, within SXA, which is, as I mentioned earlier, it was a rapid prototyping tool that they created and released within 9. They've built in new search functionality within 9.3. So you can now produce search-based components and aggregated facets and filters using SXA. From our perspective, it's an interesting addition, as search is something which most of the people we've ended up speaking to over the last couple of years have in one way or form, but which traditionally is taking up quite a lot of custom development or purchasing third-party search tools. But again, it's resulted in lots of work, lots of cost, and if you're looking to do something quicker and reduce the overheads around it, this is quite an interesting way of doing it. So what I will do now is show you a little demo to show you what I mean. So if I click here, you'll see a website on the left-hand side with filter options. Now, if I select the green in the color filter, and the filter now updates to reflect the results. So I selected green, so I get a bunch of green type fruit. And now, for some reason, I fancy big fruit, so I'm going to select that. And for some reason, not surprisingly, watermelon is the biggest fruit. Again, the filters are updated, and also selected are visible, and you're able to clear one or more filters. As I said, it doesn't seem particularly amazing in the sense that we've all seen search, but the idea being reducing the cost and overhead around the production of search for your own business. Testing. Everyone wants to know if you can improve the client experience, but if you tried using Sitecore's testing tool in the past, you might have been surprised by how Sitecore has used non-industry standard metrics to tell you if a test succeeded or failed. So they used to use something called engagement value, aka reach, which, to be fair, meant little to most of the marketers that we've spoken to in the field. They've now brought this more in line with standard testing tools, so you can now test it based upon impressions and conversions. Whereas the old method always caused, and also the old method caused a bunch of issues with XDB, so lots of performance problems, which meant lots of people just turned off XDB, which wasn't any good to anyone. So this is less about a massive change in the testing platform, more about just making it more usable on a day-to-day basis. Possibly my favorite addition in 9.3, and something mainly because it's something in which we've worked with for years and we've always wanted to be built into the platform, is personalization tracking. So to give you a bit of context around this. Previously, when you ran, if you deployed a personalization scenario, many people who bought the platform, personalization is being one of the key things they wanted to play around with and deploy once they've launched their Sitecore site. Personalization just kind of ticked the box of cool, haven't we done that? Great. But if anyone ever asked you the question of, so what value has personalization brought to us? Has it driven more conversions? Has it driven more value? It was very difficult to answer that question, but it's much easier to answer it in 9.3 because personalization previously lacked the ability to test a and a B variant. So you could deliver a personalization scenario, but as you were unable to test it against the original scenario, you were unable to compare and contrast over whether the personalization scenario in itself was driving conversions. So now you can test out of the box a personalization scenario against a small subset of your visitors. And once you've analyzed the data, you can then deploy the personalization scenario to the 100% of your audience. So again, doesn't seem a big one, but it's more about usability, and I find this one quite cool and quite useful on a day-to-day basis. Another good addition, Sitecore Analytics. So on the Sitecore Analytics dashboard, from our perspective, it's rarely going to be seen as your single source of customer truth, simply because for most clients, you're using tools such as, for example, Google Analytics being the obvious one. It's got the ability to slice and dice your data, go far more granular into your data. So invariably, people haven't really used Sitecore's analytics dashboard in anger, but you now have a single place to track all of your personalization rules. Whereas before, you'd have long lists of paper to remind you what you had deployed and where you had deployed it. So if you have 10, 20, 30 different personalization scenarios, it's obviously much easier from a day-to-day management point of view, to have a single dashboard that tells you what you've done, what you deployed, and to have a single snapshot of the results for those. So again, it's something which should have been released ideally years back, but wasn't for whatever reason, but has been now. And again, it just turns personalization into a far more usable day-to-day feature. Schedule, plan, enrollment in marketing automation. This one doesn't sound a biggie, as the platform or the automation platform itself was fully rebuilt for 9, so that was the big release. So this is just some new features. So in this case, you now have the ability to use date and time in the criteria for enrolling people into your marketing automation plans. EXM templates. So this is enhanced templates for EXM, which is Sitecore's email platform tool. Again, not a big overhaul, just incremental improvements. The platform was completely overhauled for 9. It'd be interesting to know if anyone's on the calls using EXM. It's had a troubled past. It's traditionally been slightly buggy. Its integration with automation wasn't the best, especially when people are comparing it with other out-of-the-box, best-in-breed, ESPs. It left a little to be desired. It was overhauled for 9. It's still not, we think, quite up there with best-in-class email platforms, but it comes within the platform, and it's something which you can use day to day. So in terms of new enhancements, biggie is giving content editors and email marketers a new template manager tool, so you can more easily create variations of different templates to use in your day-to-day email marketing. Sitecore AI auto personalization. Who doesn't like the obligatory use of AI as a current buzzword? But it's been included. They've called it that, so I will reference it. So what is auto personalization? So in a nutshell, the service enables you to deploy automated personalization across your Sitecore-powered website. What does this mean? Basically, you can select any component on your website to turn on auto personalization. So the idea being, it will collect, it will analyze in the background how people are interacting. You will obviously set up different scenarios, and it will start deploying scenarios by itself. In the real world, you probably want to do a lot of sanity checking around this before you start turning it on. Most people we've spoken to haven't done basic manual personalization. So the idea of leapfrogging from manual to turning on something automatic and machine powered is quite a scary leap. And the old adage of crawl, walk, run probably makes some applies to this scenario. Probably want to test something far smaller first before we go full pelt with something automated. Forms. Last and the least, but I always think forms should be first because, again, it's something which is not particularly glamorous, but it's something which most organizations use on a day-to-day basis, and it's quite important for collecting data, and why I think it should be first in the list. But again, so this is more of new features to Sitecore Forms. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, Sitecore Forms was completely rebuilt for version 9. So before it was called Web Forms for Marketers, now it's just Sitecore Forms. In effect, it's a completely new product, and it's far more usable. It gives you far more flexibility and far more options than the old version did, which was about 7 or 8 years out of date. So with what are the new additions? So we have things like we can now, new elements for confirming email and file uploads. Forms can now use Sitecore's own bot detection service to verify if it's an input from a human. So in effect, this is basically saving time for using a third-party service, which you build in for just detecting bots. The usual click on the screen if you see a zebra crossing. So they've built in their own bot detection service into forms, so something quite useful on a day-to-day basis. Redirecting to external URLs and passing form fields on as URL parameters. That can be quite useful if you're running things like PPC campaigns and you want to pass on success points onto a following page and trigger things like personalisation scenarios. And you can now publish forms directly from the Forms UI as opposed to just diving into a page and launching a form there. So Sitecore Horizon, fancy name, but basically this is a new page editing interface and experience. So if you're used to using, well, with Sitecore you have two editing experiences. You have in the back end, so editing directly from the content tree, and the in-page editing experience, which Sitecore called the experience editor, but for most people it's just the page editing experience. Horizon's quite a big change and it's quite a useful new improvement. So, for example, on the left-hand side, you'll see Horizon gives you optional editing modes. So traditionally, the in-page experience editor for Sitecore, you could see what you got in terms of editing, but if you was editing on a desktop, you would see it as a desktop. Horizon gives you the ability to change up the experience within Sitecore to see how your content is going to display across different types of devices, desktop, tablet, mobile, etc. Also comes with a new media library as well. It was always tricky using the old Sitecore media library, so this looks, from our perspective, as a greater improvement. Simulator. So simulating what the content will look like, not just on device, but also version. If you've ever had, we have, for the example on screen is iPhone 7, but we know as a business we've been testing experiences on things like iPhone 5 for some clients, and there's always weird and wonderful nuances of how the content is displayed. So you just have the option of seeing how it's going to display across a much varied range of devices, but also you could simulate how the content is going to look on a date or range in the future. So page-based analytics. So this is the last part of Horizon. So the last mode is Insight. So you can now open up page level insights directly from the page within the Horizon editing experience. Kind of looks cool. In reality, we'll find our personal opinion is that it will probably be less useful in your day-to-day marketing. It's probably quite granular, diving into a specific page and looking at the analytics. It's not allowing you to take a step back and look at I suppose, a high level view, a helicopter view of your overall customer view, which is why you'll probably still be using GA to analyze the impact of content reach, different flows within your website. So interesting, but I suspect you probably won't find it useful day to day, and you probably won't go into it as often. So how to start using the features within Sitecore. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we've spoken to lots and lots of users of the platform over the years. And one of the things which crops up time and time again is that people who buy into the platform struggle to use the full potential of Sitecore. And there are lots and lots of different reasons behind that. From our perspective, it's kind of distilled into four main areas: planning. Sitecore, like any sort of enterprise level tool, comes with lots of things you can do with it. The reality is you need to have a plan, a roadmap for getting the most out of what there is, but also not being blindsided by cool new features, mapping what's relevant in the platform against what's going to be genuinely useful for you as a business. If personalization is not useful, but optimizing your forms is, focus your efforts around planning how you can better manage forms, for example. People, this is more around not lack of people, training. So quite often when we meet people, they're just not aware of what the platform's capable of. If they are, they're not sure how to work it, how to use it, and how to deploy it in anger. A process that sits around this to help you get the most out of the platform. And fourthly, budget. And this isn't necessarily spending money with your agency to develop something or to manage part of your campaigns. This could just simply be budget set aside to ring fence internal people to spend time on this, because it takes time. Invariably, people have their day-to-day jobs, and trying to find additional time to do something new, as we all know, is a struggle. So budget in the sense that it could be money, but also it could be about budgeting additional time for people to work on this. The role of in-house team and agency, most people we speak to either work with an agency for part of their Sitecore projects. It could be on a development, um, um, or it could just be about supporting an in-house team. I think the point of it is to look at what's best fit for you as an organization. Are you looking to in-house all your functions? Are you looking to bring development in-house? Are you just looking for external support around understanding what you can do with the platform? I think it makes sense for each of you on the call today probably to sit down and write down what it is you want to focus on as a team, what part of the process can you manage or want to manage or have the time or capability, and if there's for anything else, do you want to bring in external support, and does that make sense at that point? Okay, that brings us to the end of our allotted time. So it brings us to the half-hour mark, so 2:30. So thanks for everyone listening so far today. So I want to finish off on a just quick offer for everyone on the call. We're offering a free Sitecore solution upgrade and feature audit. So no cost. It's a day or two of work from our side. We wouldn't. It's not too onerous. We wouldn't expect too much from yourselves. But basically, if you're unsure about best practice for upgrading or are looking to understand more around how you could get the most out of the features, understand which features are relevant, or how you could begin to deploy these over the next 6 to 12 weeks. We're offering an audit over the next month, which will cover some of the main components around technical requirements gathering, just analyzing the solution, benchmarking the features versus what you actually need as a business, looking at how you can optimize what features you already have, and just a couple of recommendations around how you could best deliver and begin to start working on this yourselves. So if anyone is interested, just feel free to ping me a message ping me an email, and always happy to arrange something post session. So as I said, this brings us to the half-hour mark. I did say we would have time for questions, but we've come to the end of the session, and I don't want to take up too much more of your time. So what I would do, if there are any questions that have been submitted today, I will look at this offline and I will ping you a message with an answer to your specific question in the next 24 hours. So as I said at the beginning of the webinar, the session was recorded. I will send a link to this in the next day or so. And just like to thank you for putting up with me for the last half an hour. I hopefully you found the session useful. And if you have any questions, feel free to ping me an email. Good day, and hopefully speak to you all soon.